superfluous, dishonest, and they wouldn't want to have lunch with me that day. Now, Chicago really became a modern architectural city, and there's a timeline. There's a timeline, and we see it again and again through history. You see from the turning point in Chicago's history, that great Chicago fire, supposedly started by Mrs. O'Leary's cow kicking over a kerosene lantern on the west side, and then coming back with William LeBaron Jenney's steel frame building, first Chicago School of Architecture. Those early steel frame buildings in Chicago actually have an influence on modernism. Modernism leads way to architecture flocking to Chicago even still today, and we become a world-class city, and it continues on. And the latest one is coming from a young woman. The gang's building once again, once we come under the bridge. So what I was saying, a frustrum, you'll find it occurring where? Fluorite and sapphire stones. And it's a frustrum is kind of like the little pattern of crystal that you see there. It looks like a pyramid with the top cut off and then inverted. And that was the image Jeannie was using for those kind of things. So what she's done, instead of just one vantage point, you get multifaceted viewpoints coming out of this building. Also, there's 18 different shades of blue and green glass in the building. Jeannie finds that the color, this unique color of the Chicago River water, is like nowhere else in the world. Another thing, Jeannie Gang is following tradition and history. She's following the Chicago School, she's following Bauhaus. Because what happens in both of those? That's a Chicago thing. We celebrate structure. So her building is definitely celebrating structure. Now there's a cool engineering feature. If you look at the highest tower, can you see the floor up there that's a little wider than the others? That's a blow-through hole. Because you have really heavy Chicago winds, that's how you confuse the wind. The wind will actually be able to go right through the building, and that'll help with the stabilization process. So that'll be the third tallest building in Chicago when it's completed. The current second tallest building in Chicago is directly ahead of us. It is Trump International Hotel and Tower. Adrian Smith Architects, Skidmore, Owings and Merrill, 2009.
Trump Tower.
Now it's 98 stories, 1,171 feet, but you see that's not its entire height. Because look at the roof. Architects stuck a needle on the roof, Aspire. And here's the deal. When you rate all the tall buildings around the globe, you got to turn to the council. They sound like a Monty Python comedy sketch. They're called the Council on Tall Buildings in the Urban Habitat. And here's how they look at it. Aspire is an organic element of design. In other words, the architect meant it as part of the building, so you have to measure it. Now, when it's the black building, East Bondrose AMA Tower. Another bit of contextualism is the choice of the silver blue cladding glass, because you'll notice that's halfway between the darker black framing on that modernist building by Mies van der Rohe in the background and the lighter shades of the Wrigley building coming up here. Now look 45 degrees to the right, you're about to see a very intriguing building with an almost mosque-like Moorish yellow onion skin dome. That's the Hotel Intercontinental. Began its life back in 1930 as the Medina Athletic Club, who was a project of the philanthropic group who often called themselves the Sons of the East. You know them for their circuses, the Medina Shriners. Now it was built here is the Medina Athletic Club, a state-of-the-art athletic club. Johnny Weissmuller used to train for the Olympics in the swimming pool that's inside that building, as a matter of fact. Now look at the dome on top. You see that onion skin dome? Originally they wanted to use that as a landing pad for airships, blimps, Zeppelins, but that steampunk dream kind of died, you know, with the Hindenburg. And you remember the Hindenburg, the dirigible, the blimp fell out of favor. It never was used for that. Now coming up on our right, the clock tower. London
Also a balloon about two of anywhere.
Tower on the Chicago. I'll take the clock tower of the one and only Wrigley building, commissioned by the chewing gum king, William Wrigley Jr., who was a young man, was at Burnham's wonderful Columbian Exposition World's Fair. You know what he was doing? Selling juicy fruit gum for the first time. So Wrigley wanted to bring the fair home. That's what the World's Fair looked like. Now the classical influence here is the Spanish Revival. The clock tower is modeled after the 11th century Giralda Tower in Seville in Spain. And you know what? It's popular in that revival style. Revivalism really was a style, the cradle of Western civilization. Architects went back to Greece and Rome for ideas, and that was the style of the World's Fair. Beaux-Arts, City Beautiful, or Revivalism. So the temple portion dates back to 3003 BC, inspired by the temple of Socrates. From my favorite London architect, we have a brand new Apple store with a roof that's almost like a laptop computer and a wall that's almost invisible.
Where?
And now we approach our Grand Boulevard, Michigan Avenue. You know, we still call it in the French manner Boulevard Mich. Boulevard Mich. It was inspired by the Grand Boulevards of Paris. Indeed, Daniel Burnham spent a lot of time in Paris. He went to Chicago to become known as Paris on the Prairie. But let's take it to the bridge. What happened to the bridge? The bridge itself, you'll know this is Du Sable Bridge, and this is because we're going to honor our first permanent resident, the French-speaking fur trader from Haiti, Jean-Baptiste Pont du Sable. He started a fur trading empire right there in 1779. Now you're going to see the influence of the World's Fair once again. There's a quite striking building, and there's something about the next building. There's nothing behind it. I wish the city would put a moratorium on building behind it, because I think the empty sky actually adds to the building. It's that building with the cupola or dome and the water tank and the classical water tanks right there. That's the Jewelers Building of 1926. This is again in the Beaux-Arts City Beautiful revivalist style of the World's Fair. In this case, the Italian revival. It was modeled after a 15th century Italian monastery, the Setosa de Pavia, but built here for the diamond trade. Now back in 26, you could drive your Model T Ford filled with diamonds from Lower Wacker Drive right into the basement. Your car was lifted by elevator. You'd meet it. You'd retrieve your diamonds, and you'd run through the building like a happy squirrel. You felt safe. Safety was a bit of an issue. This was prohibition. Alcohol was illegal, but to give you a tip, Chicago was never really dry. You could have a drink during Prohibition. You just went to an illegal tavern called a speakeasy. Shh, you had to have a password. And rumor has it, there was actually one right below that dome. Now coming up on our right, Ludwig Mies van Dro's final American commission is the black box here, the IBM building, now AMA Plaza. So this is the epitome of the modern style. When Mies van Dro came over here to head up the Illinois Institute of Technology, I think he's thinking new architecture buildings that are stripped to their bare essentials. So in modernism, again, there's no decoration, no ornamentation. As Mies van Dro put it, less is more. You really strip your building down to this, skeleton, skin, space. Skeleton is the frame holding the building up. Skin is the glass curtain wall space, is a square. Unless you're the rebel modernist, Bertrand Goldberg never did like squares, since the curvilinear Marina City Towers, earning their nickname the Corncob Towers in the 1960s. The student is rejecting his teacher. Goldberg had studied with Mies van Dro, but found Box's psychological slums preferring a circle to bring people together. He called these curvilinear flower form, a stem to house elevators and utilities, the rings like petals from the base up. Now, it's a city within a city. You've got docking for boats, you've got 4 restaurants, you've got a bowling alley, you've got a swimming pool, you've got a bank, office space, and your living space upstairs. Goldberg had partnered with the Janitors Union for one of the first attempts in the 1960s to do residential living right along the river downtown for people who worked in all the skyscrapers. Not everyone wanted to commute in from the suburbs. They wanted 24-hour urban living. The problem is back then, you didn't have any river walk, you didn't have anything. This whole river was industrial. So whatever you didn't have out here, he gave you right at home. He put it right at your fingertips. Now there's a squat little building coming up on the left, 55 West Wacker Drive. And that's in a particular architectural style which we would call brutalism. Brutalism comes from béton brut, and that is French for raw concrete. The brutalists were modernists who took steroids. They were like the Incredible Hulk of the architectural world. Because I've been talking in modernism, right? You celebrate structure. They celebrate structure. They get a little wild. They go over the top with those rustic concrete forms. But philosophically, the brutalist movement kind of was coming from this viewpoint. Those really heavy beams were to evoke a sense of eternity, of timelessness, a sense of gravitas. And if you think about it, brutalist architecture became very popular with a lot of university campuses and public institutions. Now, somewhat whimsical from Spanish architect Ricardo Bofill of Tola Arquitectura, our next building, 77 West Wacker Drive. Bofill's kind of a modern classicist. He's got a Greek temple-style roof, porticos, pilasters, looking like Greek columns married to the glass curtain wall of modernism. Now that building's pretty cool if you come back after dark. By day, the mirrors kind of jump out at you, but you see there's little theatrical lighting fixtures on the pilasters. So late at night, the whole building looks like a mist.